NAR is the right organization to take on these opportunities?
The consensus was that NAR is the right vehicle for doing these things, simply because
if you're not getting educated about local and national real estate market conditions, news, or the direction of the industry, you're doing yourself and your client base a disservice. This is the Knowledge Brokers Podcast. I'm here with Byron Lazine, but more importantly than Byron, we've got Jack Miller here, one of the thought leaders in the industry. He's going to talk about his company's opportunity report that just came out. Jack, I'll let you introduce yourself here and talk about the report, the danger report, the opportunity report. There's a lot to unpack, and just want to thank you again for coming on, because I think this is going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And Byron, Tom, thank you so much for having me come out. We believe we've got some really great material to share with your audience today, and we're going to dig in. Just for background, I've been in the industry, coming on 25 years in the industry. I have worked at a national franchisor. I've run a local brokerage. I've been a franchise owner. I've sold, I've listed and sold real estate here in Austin. And so I've been in the chair of many of the people that listen to this podcast, where I've either been the agent, been the broker, been the recruiter, all of those different roles. And so and our company in general brings that perspective. About 40 people. We focus on the residential brokerage industry. So our total focus is on this industry. And most of the people at our company have come out of practice, either running brokerages, selling real estate, building MLSs or associations, running technology companies that serve the real estate industry. So we have a lot of practice history. And the report that we're going to talk about today comes from our research. We do a ton of research. We publish 2 to 3 books every year. Our kind of benchmark publication, which is our trends report, we'll publish its 20th edition. So we have 20 years of publishing and studying what's happening with the residential brokerage industry, with agents, with teams, with MLS, with just the entire ecosystem about what's happening. So we feel like we bring a pretty strong body of knowledge into the room anywhere that we go.
Jack, let me jump in real quick, because Tom didn't mention it, and then you didn't mention it. The company that Jack is talking about, I've mentioned multiple times in the past, is T360. Jack is the CEO of T360. If you followed, my content for some time, you know that I pore over the reports, and these are the best reports in our space. And so appreciate what you guys are doing. But go ahead and tee up what the danger report from 10 years ago was, and then how this opportunity report
you bet,
came to be.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, the National Association of Realtors came to my partner and our founder, Stefan Swanepoel, and asked him to do an analysis of the risks to the industry. And they said, look, we want to look around the corner and see what's coming. What do we think the big risks are to agents, brokers, the whole ecosystem? What should we be thinking about as leaders? And so from that, they commissioned our company to do a study, and we spent a year interviewing in their offices CEOs of some of the largest companies and some of the biggest MLSs, and kind of all these who we thought were the smartest players to go interview. And additionally, did surveys, focus groups, talked to a lot of people in practice. And after a year, produced what is now known as the danger report. So the danger report was distributed to the industry in 2015. And it is the most read report of anything that NAR has had its hand in ever. It's our most popular report we've ever done. And that report really broke down and said, these are all the strategic risks. And I'll talk about those in just a second. But that's where we started. The report we're going to talk about today is somewhat of an update on that.
Yeah, in that danger report, and we'll link it down below. We have an article that just goes over some of the predictions and the accuracy in the danger report. I'll let you go through that part of it. It was very accurate of what would take shape over the next 10 years. I'll let you go through it. And I also want your opinion on, we knew what was coming. So do you believe the industry's learned any lessons from seeing the danger report, the last 10 years play out? Now we have all these opportunities. What was the accuracy of it, and have we learned our lesson?
Yeah. So that's a great question. couple kind of twofer there. Great question. So some of the things that we wrote about. Now, keep in mind the way that we did the research is we went and talked to who we thought were some of the smartest people in the industry about what's going on. So this was a collection of really smart people who are looking at the industry every single day, or have a big organization.
Jack,
are really plugged in.
I'm sorry to jump in again, but do you want to, when you say you went to really smart people, because sometimes when you're listening to a pod, you think, oh, well, they surveyed and it was 20 questions or 200 questions, even it's filling. That's not how you did this research. If you want to just give a little bit of background to how laborious of a process your research is when you say we went to smart people and asked them questions, because that I think will allow everyone listening to say, oh, geez, they poured not hours, but weeks and months into these reports.
Yeah, thousands. Like the first report was probably 1,000 hours of research, and what happened was Stefan went and flew to the offices of CEOs of all these different companies and went and spent an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours with them in their office, just talking about where's the industry going. So he flew to Anywhere's headquarters in New Jersey and interviewed a bunch of the executives there. He flew to Edina and Berkshire Hathaway's headquarters and interviewed, Gino Blafari and all the executives that were running it there. Spent time here in Austin, Texas, talking to Keller Williams and Gary Keller and their executive team. So it was a very rigorous process where, and we've just done that again. That's how we created the opportunity report, although without the flights this time, because everybody's now much more comfortable over Zoom. So it was definitely easier. It was definitely thanks to the pandemic, everybody's comfortable working over Zoom. But it was easier this time. We didn't have to put him on a plane as much. But so that was the level of rigor. And it was over 50 in-person interviews for the Danger Report. And I think we did a little over 50 interviews for the Opportunity Report. Plus did additional focus group survey work and collected additional data that fed the intelligence of both of these reports. So it's not a small exercise. It's not a survey that we pushed out on Facebook and reporting on that. This is that sort of thing. And we interviewed people that we felt were really plugged into what's happening now. So if it's a big company in the industry, I have an index in the back of this report, lists everybody that we talked to. And it's sort of a who's who in the industry. It's anybody that we thought would really be contributive to it. And also a sampling, not just brokers, big MLSs, coaches. Byron, we interviewed you. You were one of our candidates.
I didn't make the cut. Jeez.
And Jack, I can say on my experience, and then some of the other folks in the industry that were interviewed, Stefan has a tendency to not say, okay, we've got 90 minutes, 2 hours allotted for the interview. It goes over time. So he's working this thing over time to the fullest.
Yeah. He's an excellent researcher, and he wants to get to the ground truth. He wants to know what everybody really thinks and why they think it. And so that's what we did in this report. That's what we did in the Danger Report. So the Danger Report, you asked about, how accurate was it? So overall, we took the report and we fed it to AI, and we had the AI rate everything based on media, news sources, things that had happened. Overall, the report was rated 83% accurate from 10 years ago. So I would just say, imagine if you had a document that was 83% accurate dropped on your lap today, what would you do with that document? Well, you'd probably study the heck out of it, because that's very accurate. And there's a number of things in there. I'll go through a few of them. One of our risks, one of the dangers that we found was masses of marginal agents destroy the reputation of the industry or damage the reputation of the industry. Well, the ChatGPT rated this 85% accurate based on all the negative media coverage and all the things that have surrounded the lawsuits that have happened in the industry, mostly related to practices in the industry. Right? And so that's part of it. Commissions being compressed. That's accurate. It rated that 95% accurate, looking at the commission changes that have happened over the last decade and the ones that are even happening now. So those are the kinds of that's what was in the Danger Report. You can still get it at dangerreport.com. A lot of it still holds true. It is 10 years old, so we think you should get the new report, which is at theopportunityreport.com, because that has all of the kind of fresh new thinking. But the Danger Report is interesting for putting the entire thing in context of what happened. Now, you asked another question: is the industry going to act? Like, or have they learned? And that's really what we're hoping to make happen with things like this, where we get in front of more people and say, hey, we had this report. It was published a decade ago. By the way, our opinion, the industry didn't do anything with it. The industry read it. It was highly distributed. I saw people walking around for years. Wow, this is really great. It's great. But then we did not take action as an industry. And that's part of why, we're on shows like this, is to say, we produced a new report. The last one was super accurate. This one, we believe, is probably very directionally accurate for where people are in their business today. And so read it and take action. And that's what I'm hoping to inspire in your viewers today, is to take that report and take action. We'll go through and talk about the specifics of taking action, but to give you the insight, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and before we dive into the opportunity report and what those opportunities are, and obviously the hope that the industry takes all those actions, the headline out of that danger report was certainly that first one you mentioned, the marginal agent. Mm-hmm. So we didn't take action on that the last 10 years, and it still exists today, maybe because of a system that is, we can get into all that, but is there a clear fix for that, for the marginal agent? Is it more system based? Is it more broker leadership based? Is it more training based? Where would the marginal agent consensus kind of go away?
It's a great question. It's been the challenge of this industry. It's a very low barrier to entry to get into real estate. And part of the trouble is we have models that are built around headcount, and it doesn't matter whether the agents are good or even particularly right? And I know that your listeners probably don't fall in this camp. They're probably more productive people. More productive people tend to pay attention to industry and industry news and stay plugged in and watch what's happening. And that's so it's a challenging problem. In the new report, we address it in a bunch of different areas. One of them is licensing itself. One of our takeaways in our last report, we didn't address the regulatory agencies. In this report, we did. And we said there's something we need to work with regulatory agencies to say we need to improve the licensing requirements so that it is more rigorous, and that it requires more study and more expertise to get a license and to maintain it. And there's some states that do more. I'm in Texas. Texas requires 240 hours of education in order to get a real estate license, which is the most, I think, nationally. But there are states that require as little as 10 hours of education in order to get licensed. And that's a pretty big spread. I mean, 10 hours, you can do that in a long day if you skip lunch, right? Yep. So So the point is there's things that we need to do across the spectrum. And in the opportunity report, we talk about that, hey, brokers need to up the requirements of who they allow to do business in their company. Associations need to focus on professionalism and training. But there's no one source we can go to and say, you're responsible for letting all these folks in. We're all going to have to work at it as professionals. And the good news is some of these practice changes that have happened, I think are going to help with that. It's become, you have to operate more professionally now in explaining your value proposition than you have had to in the past. So I think that's the danger actually, is that if we don't take action, if we don't focus on professionalism, that there may be additional lawsuits, additional problems that happen, and then we get more regulatory action in our industry, which I don't think anybody wants. That's not what we want.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to jump into with you, Jack. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, and the report is very fascinating because you looked at the professionals with minimal licensing requirements: bartender, security guard, pest control technician. I don't really associate myself with that, but I understand how you compared it to. And then you have the other folks that, like doctors, right? 7 years of school, pilots, 1,500 flight hours, lawyers, 7 years of education. So the challenge I see here, and I wanted to get kind of see what you might recommend as someone who studied all this and talked to all these folks. I don't know that it should be as extreme as a doctor. It also should be a lot more aggressive than a bartender or a pest control technician. I mean, and I've always looked at the job of a real estate agent. I mean, it's a professional. You should treat it like a lawyer, like a financial advisor, like an accountant. What do you see as a viable solution here? Because I agree there's standards within the companies, but the state level makes it so easy. And there's always that, Byron, you talk about the race to the bottom, people that'll just take headcount and look for whoever's got a pulse to come in and try to fill a void. So what do you see as a viable solution here that the industry can actually act on?
There's a few different angles of attack here. As a broker, thinking about looking in the broker environment and in the team environment, what we need to do is really adopt the mentorship, apprenticeship type of model. And you'll see when you look at teams that are very successful, And they do that. They bring people in. They say, "Hey, we're going to train you on, how to work with buyers first, and you're going to learn this one particular aspect of the business. We're going to fly side by side with you and make sure that you do things properly and well." Some brokers have very good mentorship programs or apprenticeship type programs, and from that's in the broker context. Is that? And I'd say if you're running a team, you're building a team, that mentorship that you provide your agents is part of the solution to professionalism in the industry. It's very valuable, and by the way, way more productive. If you take an agent and you properly mentor them, the likelihood that they're going to stay in the industry and actually get business productive goes way up. And we've seen that in all the brokerages that we've done consulting with. The places that have those programs, people stay longer and they do more transactions on average. The brokerage I ran, we took people that were selling 3 or 4 homes a year, did a rigorous mentorship program with them, fed them leads over a period of time, and we got them to a 6-figure income usually within 18 months. And that's the kind of thing where if you view as a broker, as a team leader, that's what we should look to produce. Is let's look to produce people that really practice it at a high level. It is the same at the association level as well. The association should be looking to support full-time professionals and providing the services and requirements for being members of the association, so that the consuming public knows, hey, I'm working with a person who is professionally not just licensed, but recognized as a realtor, and they're practicing at a higher level of value. And that's in the report as well, talking about elevating that standard of expectation from the consumer, but by both the association and by the brokerage. Hard job, but necessary. We really have to do it. And then I already mentioned on the regulatory side, most of our legislatures, and I'll get very passionate about this. Most of our legislators do not understand real estate. They don't understand how real estate works. They don't understand the industry.
Most people don't.
Most people don't, right?
Yeah.
Right. So how can we expect them to understand the necessity of having more requirements for licensure in order to create a safer, better, more high quality marketplace for the consumer? If they don't understand the transaction, and I would say those that are involved in organized real estate and lobbying, they need to get engaged, because we've done this with some clients with a few states. And that's what we found, is that, for the most part, the legislators and the regulators, they don't really get it. They don't understand it. And if they did, then they would get behind things like that. And guess what? That's good for the professionals in this industry. It means the professionals will be better supported and will keep people from coming in and treating this as not really a career. It's something you can just go try out and mess up a few transactions. The problem is one bad agent in your brokerage that does some things with a few customers can ruin the reputation of the brokerage and the industry. I mean, that's what we're seeing. That was in our danger report, right? So that's the solution. Not easy to do, but those of you that are professionals, building teams, building brokerages, supporting organizations, that's the job right now. It really is.
Yeah. On the regulatory issue, I mean, I just want to make a comment on everything you said, which was, I think was on the money. But I think we're putting, as an industry, too much of the pressure on the teams. Teams have done a great job of this, and there are brokerages that have done a great job of this that said, hey, I'm not going to go after every body. I'm going to create an environment where I'm only bringing on professionals. So teams and brokerages have done this, but there's also been, unfortunately, in every state almost, there has been some of these small independent brokers that have gone to their state, their Department of Consumer Protection, for example, and said, hey, I don't like these teams. And they're acting as if they're a brokerage, or they're acting as if this. And a lot of the states across the country have gone and put a tax on teams that doesn't exist on brokerages. Every time you on and offboard a team member, as a team, you get taxed. You don't as a brokerage. Or you have to pay a certain fee as a team that you may not have to pay as a brokerage. And this is really just based out of, and this is why, like we were talking off camera, hey, will the brokers ever get together and build an MLS? Of course they won't. They can't even stop the infighting on stuff like this. And so why, and here's what I see, these regulatory commissions in these states, DCPs or whatever they are, they see an opportunity when they get a problem like this. Oh, how do we monetize it? How do we create a revenue stream? And that's why the licenses are so easy to get. It's a revenue stream as opposed to doing what they virtue signal is right for the consumer and actually making, policies that are for the consumer. So how is it, do agents have to get involved legitimately in politics to try to change those agencies? Are those agencies removed from the politics in the states where you can't even control them? How do you actually change that? What you said was right on. They don't know anything about real estate. How do you make change?
Yeah. Well, part of this is a focusing document. There's things that the industry really needs to focus on, and this is one of them. And all the way up to NAR, our messaging in the second half of the report about what organized real estate should do is that NAR needs to focus on advocacy, and this falls under advocacy. This is an area where we need better standards, both nationally and at the state level. And this is an area where a lot of the professionals, not saying everywhere, there's some places where this is not true, but a lot of the professionals or the busy brokers have kind of kind of put a blind eye to what's going on over there at the association. I don't really need to know. I'm too busy running my business, right?
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to do. It's easy to do. You go, look, I'm busy running a business. I don't have time to get involved. But I would say, why are we letting the lunatics run the asylum? We need to have some qualified people, right? We need to have better people that are advocating for good business changes, because here's the risk, Byron. Here's the risk that if we don't, there will continue to be these lawsuits. And unfortunately, even if a lawsuit doesn't impact you directly, the fact that there is a lawsuit in our industry, or the fact that there are people that are saying, hey, there's agents that are low quality, I can come in, I can make a bunch of money, it just makes the industry look bad. So it's one of these things where it might not have fallen on the agenda of a lot of busy business leaders to get a little bit more involved, but they should, because it's an ecosystem and we need to keep the ecosystem healthy, and that's what it is. So, those of you that have not been involved with your local association, I'm not saying give up all your time to them, but check in and see how you can help, because this is now a bigger issue. This is something where the consumer is involved.
And you might be surprised if you start showing up at who's making the decisions. You're like, whoa, they did 2 deals in the last 12 months and they're heavily influencing. And I'm not saying, maybe they're 40 years experience, they've slowed down. And so there's always context here, but there is also a kind of a social club that happens sometimes at these local associations, whether the people driving the decisions are doing a ton of business or not, which means that they're not really hearing what the customers and the consumers in those local communities want. They're in an echo chamber of what they think the industry should look like. And then often that leads to who they like and don't like.
Yeah, we have that in the second half of the report where we talk about organized real estate. We need better qualifications for leadership to serve in volunteer leadership. We need people with more diverse business backgrounds. If you look, and again, I'm not saying this just to be bad or anything, but if you look at the requirements for leadership at the National Association of Realtors on the executive leadership team, you need to have not had a bankruptcy in the last 7 years and have a clean criminal background check. Right. We should have people that are former executives, people with finance experience, people with legal experience, people that bring something to the table. By the way, that applies at the local board. It applies at the state.
Yeah.
We need people that are a little bit more savvy from a business perspective. And the volunteers, listen, I'm all for volunteers. We just need to have qualified people that are helping advocate for our industry. And so that's, again, I know most of your readers or listeners can't just dive in and fix that, but that is the fix. That is what needs to happen. We need better leaders engaged with advocacy.
Here was, and we're going to link the opportunity report is 114 pages, I believe. We'll also link some of the articles that have highlighted it, nowbam.com, realestatenews.com. Some of the opportunities for organized real estate, the bundle of opportunities, the 9 or so, drive market transparency, separate MLS organizations, cultivate the future of real estate with a modern new professional, maximizing value through consolidated MLSs, rebuilding trust, evolving beyond the 3-way agreement, the tie-in agreement. Realtor associations must streamline and unite, reimagine what realtor association leadership means, and then prioritize advocacy as NAR's central mission.
Yeah.
In over the 50 plus multiple hour conversations Stefan and the T360 team had, was there a consensus one way or another if NAR is the right organization to take on these opportunities? Or was there a fragmented feeling, or was there an overwhelming consensus that NAR is not the right organization to do this?
So the consensus was that NAR is the right vehicle for doing these things, simply because of the amount of assets it has in place. I mean, NAR has so many different assets, including the relationships that their lobbying team already has, and that the organization has developed over the past 100 years. So it would be very, very hard, based on the opinions of leaders we talked to replace NAR with something that had as much muscle as NAR does have. It's kind of like it would take decades to grow a new association or a new professional organization that would have that level of strength. It just takes time to build it up, and they have it. But there was a very strong opinion. All the things you just read, it's really about refocusing the National Association of Realtors, the state associations, the locals, the MLSs on more important missions. To say, look, we cannot be driven by all these different initiatives and all. NAR has over 1,000 board members. Can you imagine trying to run any organization with 1,000 board members? It's crazy. It's more than Congress. It's twice what Congress has for representation. That's absurd. I think everybody looks at this from the outside looking in. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. We have an executive committee that's 80 people. It's bigger than almost any corporate board I've ever heard of. And the executive leadership team, it's all, I'm sorry to say, it's all realtor or broker members, many of whom aren't qualified to run a $300 million organization. They're great people. They're great, maybe great leaders in their local markets, and they've definitely done their time serving the organization. But we need more qualified people that are on a more focused mission. So the report calls for stripping out the committees, hiring a super empowered staff that's really well qualified. It's streamlining the executive team, all this kind of stuff, to have it be a much leaner but more focused organization on what the industry really needs. And so that was the leadership we heard consistently, like, yeah, we need NAR, but what we need NAR to be different. We need NAR to be more effective. Look at the track record of NAR, the 30-year mortgage, the FHA and VA programs, all the lending stuff they've done, fair housing. They've done great work, but most of it is in the distant past. Most of it is in the 60s and 70s, and it's a long time ago. And there are some good things that NAR has done. They mostly protect things and keep from going wrong. But we need to do more. We need to do more on affordable housing. We need to do more on professionalism. These are areas that need a lot of focus. And so with all this, 1,000 members, all of these different boards, sub-boards and committees, we're distracted. We're not focusing on what matters. And that showed up in our face in the form of this lawsuit, in the form of, we're not addressing the leadership challenges of today. It's too spread out. It's too discombobulated. And that's part of this document. It's a focusing document. It is intended for that purpose of helping the industry get focused and do what needs to be done.
And so if that, and I was pretty certain that was the consensus, that you're not going to, create a new organization. There's an organization trying to be, it's not going to go anywhere. I've been on record of saying that. So if you're not going to create a new organization, then you've got to get the current one to Jack, to your point, to, have the vision, have the strength to be able to move the industry forward on where we need to be. And so to your earlier point, like for the listeners, like getting involved, I am for the first time, what is it, next week? I'm going to be in Boston. I've never gone to an NAR event. And Deborah, Gary Ashton's CEO, Deborah, we were at Realtor.com last week. She's like, Byron, you should just show up. She goes, you'd be welcomed there, even with some of your critiques of NAR. And if you want to get some of the changes made, I think we're all going to, as an industry, have to start showing up and creating a voice and some action into making the actual change that we keep talking about. So I'll be there in Boston. If you're going to be there in Boston, let me know. I don't think Tom's going though, Jack. So we can after I go, I can call Tom the problem.
Yeah. Well, this brings up an interesting point, Jack, because one of the opportunities you mentioned, and I wanted to hit on this, is the leadership within the industry is very near retirement age at like the brokerage level and the team level. And you're talking about a leadership at a larger level, and you look at the median age of real estate agents, it's 60 years old. 52% of the respondents in the survey that NAR does about their membership said they're over 60 years old. So you got guys like Byron and I've been doing this 24 years, and I still feel like I'm way younger than the average agent. How do you see that shift changing to help move these sort of standards forward? Because I'm on people when they get to their 60s, they're closer to retirement than they are the prime of their career. I think this is a really great point that you bring up.
Well, I'll tie it to a couple of things. There's one of the opportunities we have in the first section for brokers and agents talks about merger and acquisition, and then in the latter section about organized real estate, we talk about a lot about consolidation. So we should take the opportunity of people retiring and use it in the MLS space and the association space. Use it to consolidate. Use it to say, look, if we're going to have a whole wave of retirement, which is happening, we're seeing it, and then let's consolidate organizations and end up with a stronger organization, hopefully with a much better leader, a person that can run a bigger organization more effectively. And the same is true in the team business and brokerage. This is an area where there's a lot of brokers that have no succession plan. They have nowhere to go. And we should look at that as an opportunity right now and say, look, let's roll up. Let's take some of the ambitious leaders that are still building their companies, and we're seeing those, the EXPs, the Reals, the Fathoms, the United Real Estates. You look at the top 20 brokerages, half of them are companies that are less than 15 years old.
Yep.
Are newer companies, half of them. And that's all happened really in the last 6 years that we've seen those companies take over that top 20. And so my point is, we are in a major demographic change right now, and we should leverage that to build better organizations, whether it's an MLS, an association, a brokerage, a team, whatever. Great, let's do it, because the time is now. And those of you that have been kind of waiting for your broker to retire to do your next thing or move up in the ladder, go have that conversation with them. We wrote about it actually in this year's Trends Report that's coming out in December. We have a whole chapter on leadership transitions and what succession looks like and how to do it properly and well, because it's a huge issue, and we need to have new, invigorated. I'll speak up for Gen X, some Gen X leadership in there. It's our time. We're going to get our 10 minutes in the sun, and then, Y and Z are going to come after us, and the millennials are going to take over. But, we need to have our time and do our part for leading the industry.
Well, it's interesting when we did BAM Mania a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas, I had a fireside chat with Rob Hahn, and he kind of took it. Rob, right, Jack?
Oh, very well.
Yeah. He took it upon himself to poll the entire audience, which age demographic they were in, and there was a good Gen X group there, but the overwhelming majority of the audience was millennial. And Rob said he pointed out at the BAM Media audience, and he said this is the future of real estate.
100%.
And so for the millennial and Gen X generations, and then the Gen Z that are coming up, it is not only. I love the Ivy Zellman quote I always bring it up, talking about it's not enough to just know the inside and out about your micro market. She actually goes to say it's erroneous to not know your macro market, and that's the economy, the industry conditions, the stuff that you guys pour over at T360, and then to get involved to shape that industry or things. Jack, I don't know if you agree with this. I put out a post on X that 2024 was harder than 2008.
This is interesting.
This is interesting. I'd like your opinion on this. So you got 3.84 million existing home sales. Everybody in 2008, and you could say 2008, you could pick 2009, whatever, whatever one of those years. I mean, the short sales were impossible. The buyers, it was desert town for buyers. It was ghost town in a lot of communities. Reason why I say 24 was harder was because when you take a worse year on existing home sales since 1995, potentially we're going to close out at, and then on top of that, you put all the lawsuits, all the new changes. When you combine those two forces, I give the edge to 24. What do you think?
So I'm going to 100% agree with you. Our brokerage, the local brokerage that I ran, we opened at the end of 2008. And so we rebuilt from that. It was a great timing.
Good
So
timing. Yeah. Was that in the report? Open
that.
a brokerage in 2008.
Good time to start. Awesome. Not a good time to be like inflated and blown up and lots of expenses.
Yes.
No, not at all. But what I would say is, yes, I agree. I think this is more difficult because we've got the economics, the mortgage financing, the affordability problems, like, and the practice changes, and potentially other lawsuits that are still out there. We're not done with these lawsuits yet, right? So all of those things add up to what is a more challenging year. But here's what I would tell your listeners. The core of the opportunity report is about the opportunity right now, because the time to build something that is legacy, generational, game changing is in the toughest market conditions. And that's right now. If you are investing in your business today, if you're redesigning look, no one's going to care if you redesign your business right now. No one's going to care, right? If you're a brokerage, you can blow it up and rewrite it the way you want it to be going forward, because it's really hard to do that when you're, growth and things are going crazy, and like, it's impossible. But right now, I've said, you know what, guys? It's all new comp plans, new service models. I'm replacing all the office staff. I've offshored this. I've done this. I've made this change. I got rid of this technology, all that kind of stuff. People are cool with that right now. That is what you should be doing, right? And if you do that now, you remargin your business. I don't care if it's a team, a brokerage, or whatever. You remargin it right now. You set it up for what's coming. You'll win. You'll win. It's just mechanics. People want to buy. There's demand building up right now. And all it takes is a little change, and that demand starts flowing back into the market. And if you've got yourself, and that's why I say read that section for agents and brokers on the opportunities.
Yeah.
Because get sharp with your buyer proposition. Get your systems in place to do buyer transactions better. There's some awesome tools coming out right now. There's some people that are really focusing on this. I'm making that whole side work great. And then you'll be ready. You'll be ready as the market comes back, and you'll get the rewards. I watched companies, including ours, that built during that downturn, and they're the ones that ended up winning. They're the ones that ended up with market share. So that's how it happens, and we're in that. Don't miss that moment. It's
Jack, what's your number on agents or brokers across the country who haven't truly decoupled? The number one opportunity for real estate brokers and agents here in the report is decouple buyer and seller agents compensation. I have heard James Dwiggins say it's about 70% of the country is still is not fully decoupled, or where do you what does your data tell you?
We did our own study of that. We surveyed our database to find out what's happening, and this survey data is probably about 8 weeks old now. And we found a third of people were still doing it what we call the old way, where you ask your sellers to offer buyer compensation up front, and that they agree to offer it up front. However you do it depends on how your state structures it and how your listing contracts work. But where you basically go to the seller and say, look, I need you to offer something up front in order to sell your home. So about a third of the people we surveyed were there. About a third of people were over in the new way. We're saying, hey, we don't do that. We just tell the buyer's agent, submit what you need in your offer, and we'll build it in. And again, however it's done in your state, it's going to vary, but we'll build it in. You could say to the buyer's agent, we're not going to offer anything up front, but tell us what you need to get.
Put it in the offer.
Put it in the offer, right? And then about a third of them were like, we do some of both. We're not either or. We're in a market where some people are transitioning one way or the other. There's definitely markets that are. There's some states that I found out that are really holdouts. That are like really trying to hold on to that.
Washington, right? There's an MLS, and is it Washington or Oregon? There's an MLS that's still showing offers of compensation.
Northwest MLS, broker-owned MLS. They actually they're innovative and progressive in that they tried to get ahead of these lawsuits by doing more. They're like, you know what, we're going to beef up. They required buyer representation agreements. They included fees. They rewrote their listing. They did all this well before the lawsuits. And they really did it to say, we want to continue doing business where there's an offer made up front. But what we're going to do is make sure the consumer, the agent, is talking to their buyer and saying, here's how compensation works. And so they've stuck with it. But then there's some states that I've learned. I even learned yesterday, like Michigan. The majority of the state of Michigan is still kind of doing it the old way. And then there's definitely pockets. Like I found about communities here in Texas where it's like, oh yeah, all the brokers there are still basically doing it the old way, which, by the way, is very risky. It's very risky. If you are a plaintiff's attorney, you have this huge settlement you can just point at and say, hey, they're doing it the way that NAR lost this case and settled, and this group of brokers here in this market are continuing to do what that practice was. And that's, prosecution rests, so I think it's very risky to continue doing it the old way. For those of you that are not convinced, go watch all of James Dwiggins' podcasts on this topic. He's done a very good job of pulling that apart.
Yeah, I think it's just so irrelevant what the offer is.
Totally.
And almost everything is becoming irrelevant if you think about it. All right, they're offering something or they're not. Doesn't matter. Is it the right offer for my buyer? We're going to put everything into the offer that my buyer needs either way, no matter what their offer is. So I don't even need to hear it because it's actually irrelevant to what the buyer needs. Just like I love your point on this. Just like these buyer contracts are essentially irrelevant. Okay, you're going to sign a 3-month agreement that can be canceled at any time in writing. Doesn't mean anything. Okay, so you got to get it in writing to be able to move forward. But what actually means something is if they trust you as their advisor. I can fire my financial advisor any day of the week. He's on a day-to-day contract anyways. But I haven't, and I've used them for years, and I trust them, and he's a resource that I keep going back to because he continues to earn that trust and that working relationship. And we're getting caught up in I need a buyer agreement that locks somebody in, or I need an offer that's locked in. It's all irrelevant if you know how to package a deal and talk deals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's part of it. In the set of opportunities we list out in the report, we talk about elevating the buyer services and the professionalism around working with all your clients, buyers and sellers. I mean, it is unreasonable to expect a consumer who buys a home maybe every 12 years to understand our job. It's unreasonable. They're not going to understand it. And so you're going to have to demonstrate it professionally. You're going to have to explain to them all the things you're doing. And just like I said this the other day in front of the broker group, it's I have a great attorney. We have a great CPA firm. Anytime they do work for us, I get a really nice report back from them. It says all the things they did, what they charged. I don't like that they charge by the hour, which is a huge difference in real estate that I love, that I think makes us better.
Yes, of course.
But I get a detailed report and I go, yeah, that's right. We did, we had these conversations, these things happen, and we should be doing the same thing in real estate. Explain the process really well. Because if you explain real estate process really well to the average consumer, they want your help more. They're not going to go do it themselves. And I think the industry has a bit of a psychological problem, especially on the buy side. Buyers agents are like, oh, people are just not going to use us. What are you, crazy? I was licensed and I wouldn't go do a transaction without a buyer's agent who's in market right now because they know what the norms are. They know what's happening. They're plugged in. A good buyer's agent provides tons of value. So those of you that are worried about your value proposition, you got tons of value. You got tons of value. And if you need to, puff yourself up, go talk to your past clients. They'll tell you. And start explaining what you do. If you explain what you do, people, they don't want to do your job. The average consumer does not want to do all the things that a buyer's agent does to get a transaction done. They just don't. They want help. They want advice. They want somebody they can trust. And so that's the opportunity, right? Those of you that, and by the way, the agents that can't explain it, that don't understand their value, they're going to get out. That's the opportunity. So if you're the professional, you're going to stick around and you're going to gain market share and you're going to take that business, right? So that's the opportunity right now. So those of you that are pros, keep going, keep being more and more professional, up your game every single chance you get. And with things like this report, use it to improve your game.
Yeah, you mentioned in the report there's 180 different tasks that were identified in the real estate transaction, and you also talked about the opportunity to thrive amid commission compression. And I'm a big believer, and you said it, the best agents are made during challenging times because the people that are all in, winners are gonna win in any industry. Yeah. They're gonna figure it out somehow, and I think a lot of people lose sight of that. And then the other thing you mentioned too, you talked about being ready for when there's that small shift in the market. And, Andrew Carnegie always said, profits come in waves, right? Sales come in waves. So you got to really manage that appropriately. So with that in there, and you talk about decoupling commissions and thriving among this compression, I'm a big believer that really what matters is what you say to people. Forget the contracts and everything else. So when it comes to, you're talking to agents or you've run companies, what advice do you have for the knowledge brokers out there, especially the listeners on this program, how they can thrive amid this environment versus maybe being one of the people that steps out or gets overtaken by a more challenging environment than we saw even just like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Also, this is a kind of a fundamental premise. All things being equal, you have two agents, and they basically have the same level of skill. The one that is the best able to explain what they do to the consumer will win. Like, that's it. So, and that when I talk about sharpening your game, most of sharpening our game on the buy side is explaining what we do really well. And I agree with you, Tom. I don't think it's about necessarily like I tell people to understand all the work they do for the client, but that's not academic. It's like, understand the work you do for the client, so you can do a better job of telling them. You can do a better job of explaining them. And I would say, collect every story you have about a time when you helped a client, especially on the buy side, save money, avoid a massive headache, get out of a deal that wasn't the right deal for them, negotiate a tough situation where you had some kind of disagreement. Because those of you, I know, the people that listen to this, you have those stories. And I would say, are you telling them? Because if you can say, hey, these are all the things I do. By the way, here's some real world stories of people that I helped and how I saved them tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, I know I have stories myself recently from last year. I'm not even in practice. I got a friend of mine. She was shopping with an agent, and she kind of got disillusioned and decided to go buy directly from a builder without an agent, unrepresented. And she's like 6 figures in the hole now because of she didn't know what inspections to ask for. She got help at the last minute, which we were able to salvage a few things, but it probably cost her $100,000 in headaches, cash, delays, problems, all that kind of thing. And it's like, I wasn't even her agent. And I could tell how much an agent would have helped.
As we try to really get more inventory in this country, because it's a need, there has got to be a huge awareness around how national home builders operate. Some of these national home builders, the way that this is like timeshare level stuff, the way they lock people into contracts. It's egregious. Some of the practices of their sale. These are some of the, I just compare it to time. I think about Dave Ramsey, ripping timeshare salespeople apart. When you think about national home builder salespeople, these are some of the worst salespeople in the industry, and there's got to be protection there. And I don't think enough consumers realize that, because you go to that sales room and it seems all legit.
Yeah, we have some of our clients are brokers who do a lot of new construction sales, maybe 30 or 40% new construction sales. A lot of them condo development communities, things like that. And we've had them. They actually have a separate contract. If you're like, oh, I'm gonna as a buyer, I'm gonna shop new construction, or their contract incorporates and says, look, if you're doing new construction, there's a whole set of additional services we supply to you, and it costs more. It's 2 or 3 points more to purchase new construction, because it's a 2-year window. You're going to have to talk to the builder over that time. You want to make sure that they did things properly. We're such a believer in that, and agents have a lot of value to add into that transaction if you're educated on it. If you're educated on new construction, you can save people so much money and so many hassles and headaches working with a builder. I always say, don't go into, you're going into a courtroom and one side has an attorney and your side does not in the new build purchase.
Of course.
That's crazy. That's crazy. That no one should do that.
It's much different than existing. So an agent that really knows that world inside and out. And when I say, the salespeople that some of these practices are egregious, I'm specifically talking about I'm specifically talking Pulte. Okay. I'm specifically talking NAR. I can run down the list of the rest of them, but I can go on for days about that. All right. So we covered some of the opportunities for brokers and agents, opportunities for organized real estate. We also talked about state regulatory agencies, but I think this is a good segue to talk about really that last big bundle of opportunities, which, if I go to page 98 in the report, I love your headline, the headline you guys came up with, Jack. Make home ownership an affordable dream again. It sounds like a rallying cry. I actually shortened it a little bit, posted it on X. Make home ownership affordable again. I don't know if T360 is coming out with red and white hats with that slogan on it and going to sell some merch, but it is a true statement, more true than ever. And it's one that can change the landscape of the industry in the most meaningful way, probably more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another one where we want to have the industry's eye on the ball, right? We need to be focused on the cost of getting people into housing, because at T360, we are just the biggest believer that homeownership is the cornerstone of wealth building in the U.S. I mean, it is how you talk to people who have come from whatever background that they were in, and they're now financially well off today, or they're comfortable, or they're in solidly in the middle class. And I can tell you, homeownership was involved. And it's just time and time. And again, big fan of Dave Ramsey's podcast and what he shares. Homeownership is a path, and is the most reliable path this country has to wealth building. And so we need to keep our eye on that ball and make sure that there needs to be a ladder for people to climb. And so that first rung in the ladder, we need to advocate for that as an industry. Now, granted, we don't build, like our industry, the brokers, the agents, we don't build the homes, right? But we talk to everybody in the ecosystem, and everybody talks to us, right? We're the tip of the spear in terms of who the consumer goes to. So this is where we need to be advocating locally for relaxing building rules, permitting, zoning, like all those kinds of things. Those got to change. We've got to become really crisp with talking to investors. There's a lot of boomers that own investment properties that their kids don't want after they die, right? So sell those properties, like get them on the market. That's inventory that needs to be on the market. We're also the people that can go and say, hey, we see a great refurb opportunity that we can give to we can find the right buyer for it, who can take maybe a large home and split it up, condoize it, turn it into a duplex or a fourplex, right? So we're the boots on the ground, many times see the things and say, look, that's an opportunity for somebody to create some quality, affordable housing, right? And so that's the role. And if we're organized, if NAR is organized around that, us as agents and brokers organized around that, leaders at the state and local level organized, say, look, part of the deal is we need to have that entry rung in the ladder. And I'll tell you, it's critical for our industry. We need people buying their first home so they can sell their first home, so they can buy their second home, so they can buy their vacation home. Like, we need people moving up that ladder for a healthy industry and for a healthy consumer that is building wealth and being able to fulfill their version of the American dream, whatever version that is, right? So that's why we put that in there. We feel like it's everyone we talk to, Tom, Byron, everybody we talk to got behind that. It's like, yeah, we all agree. Like, this is so important that we all need to talk about it. So I'd say look for those opportunities, and there's some things that are being talked about that I think are brilliant. Like, what about a national tax, a tax holiday on capital gains for mom and pop investors? If you own about 85% of single family homes are owned by mom and pop investors that own less than 10 units. I'm one of them. My wife and I own some single family rentals here. And if I knew I could take a tax holiday and sell one of those to a first time home buyer, not have to pay cap gains on it, I would do it tomorrow. That's instant inventory like that. So we need things like that being talked about and being advocated for. And again, we're the people that are the most connected in the residential industry. It's not the mortgage folks. It's not the title folks. It's brokers. It's agents. We talk to everybody. And I think that we're the people that can make things like that happen. We may not swing a hammer, but we can help create inventory in a lot of different ways.
It might be too big of a dream to think that the federal government is going to help. So you really, to your point, you've got to try to do it locally. I mean, I think the best thing, federal government could do is, kind of allocate certain areas where you could reimagine a whole new city. You've seen some other countries do this. Yeah. That would be interesting.
We got read up on opportunity zones. Opportunity zone stuff.
Opportunity zones.
Super interesting. And by the way, some of the listeners on this, I know some of you guys are property investors. Some of you guys are small unit developers. Again, this is a great time to shine. And that the opportunity zone, all the ecosystem around that. What a dynamic wealth building tool that opportunity zones are. But I think we need to go use them. We need to go exploit that they exist. And we don't talk enough about it in this industry. We really don't.
Yeah. And just, I hope you have a couple more minutes, Jack, because I know all right, good. Sure. So the opportunity report's going to be linked down below, as well as the upcoming 20th trends report, which I encourage everybody to purchase a copy of that. The opportunity report you can download. But on the subject of government, while I have you, and since the election is next week,
who are you voting for, Jack? We want to know.
No, we're not going to ask you that.
Doing that. Come on.
But here, I'm curious about this. do you see an environment, depending on which way the election goes, where there could be a less aggressive DOJ?
That's a great question.
And I've heard both sides of this where it's like, forget about it. If there's a less aggressive DOJ, it doesn't matter. These issues will pop up in the future. I'm going back to some of the, regulatory issues in real estate. Do you think that if you had a DOJ maybe similar to what you had in 2019 that settled and said, okay, here's the plan we move forward with, that would be, a productive thing for the real estate industry? Or do you think you should just go to the extreme on everything and kind of acquiesce to what the current DOJ thinks?
So it's an interesting question. I would say it doesn't matter. And I'll tell you why. The lawsuits and the DOJ interest in our industry came from consumers not understanding how our industry worked and some practices that candidly are outdated. Like they're just outdated. Buyer agency really became prevalent in the 90s. I believe what we're seeing right now, this set of practice changes, they're just evolving to the next thing that our industry needs to do anyway. So it's sort of like we're already there. Just run with it. By the way, if you run with it sooner and better than everybody else, you're going to pick up market share. And in a year from now, guys, we're not even going to be talking about this. It's going to be like, yeah, that's just how you do deals now. You write what you want in the offer for your compensation. It's what you already agreed to with your buyer. Your buyer understands how you get paid, all that kind of stuff. So that issue is not going to go away. And so to some extent, it doesn't matter. And the other part, it doesn't matter. And I'll tell you, this is the other piece that gives me pause. We have a lot of other lawsuits in this industry. There's a lot of other areas of vulnerability, and they're coming from the civil side. They're not coming from DOJ. They're coming. Sitzer Burnett was not a lawsuit started by the DOJ. It was definitely influenced by the DOJ. But if you look at other practices in our industry, and you're a crafty attorney, you go, well, where else do we think the consumer's not well informed about what's going on, or they don't understand the money, or we feel they're being taken advantage of in some way? Or look at where your E&O insurance is higher, like for instance, states that allow dual agency, E&O insurance is higher in those states. Anywhere your insurance rates are higher, anywhere your insurance rates are higher is liability and risk. Yeah. And I think we need to be, as an industry, thinking about reducing the liability and risk by adopting better practices anyway. That's progressive. That's what we should do. It doesn't matter who's in the administration. It matters for the consumer, and it matters for us having a stronger, better industry. So I would just say, on the principle of that, just do it. And if whether you have a more or less aggressive DOJ, you won't have to worry about it because you're doing a better practice anyway.
Well, I agree with all of that. I mean, the DOJ left the door open, and some of the DOJ rhetoric over the last 4 years, not just in this industry, but across how they look at business, left the door open for the attorneys to get super aggressive with those lawsuits. And, they're not driven. Most of those lawsuits are not driven by plaintiffs. They're driven by attorneys. And I don't know.
I'm not saying it's driven by those plaintiffs down. It's definitely the attorney industry is very aggressive. And now they've proven that they can take $1 billion.
Yeah. It's rolling downhill now.
Yeah. So they're going to keep going. And I'd say on that basis alone, it's just better to improve it. Let's just improve it and stay ahead of it. That'll work no matter what happens.
Quick thoughts here on November 1st. Clear cooperation, going away, staying the same, or being amended?
So there's the thoughts of the people that we interviewed in the report, which was interesting. We somewhat captured a moment in time, like we caught a mosquito in some amber in a struggle, right? Because we talked to people on both sides of that issue. And it had lots of pros and cons. I have a personal opinion. There's some other people at T360 have different opinions. I think at a minimum, CCP needs to be changed. It'll need to be modified in ways that allow the brokers the flexibility that they want and need, and respect what sellers want to do. There are, however, some misleading arguments in some of the people who say just get rid of CCP entirely. A lot of those arguments are driven by the desire to double-side transactions within a brokerage.
Yep.
Some of those arguments have massive impacts to the MLS. I'm very passionate about the MLS. I think that people go, oh, well, the compensation's not in there. What's the value of the MLS? What are you, crazy? It is the least expensive, most effective tool this industry has ever built, and you can buy it on a monthly subscription.
Yeah, talk to an agent who's an expert in her marketplace and tell her to go use Zillow and get the data of past or any of these portals. And she's like, what? I want my MLS.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the taxes aren't even right on these things.
CCP is the getting rid of CCP for some is a pathway to pull all their listings out of the MLS and thus creating, I think, a worse consumer experience. The agent is not going to be as valuable. It concentrates power in a few big companies, and we need a free market. And I think the MLS is the core of the free market, and CCP is a part of that. Now, is it perfect as written? No, I think it needs some changes. It needs to be revised. And the people we talked to, there's a lot of people said, you know what, we need something, but the current CCP is probably not it. So I would expect them to change it.
So I'm basically right with where you're at, because I think
I agree.
There's arguments on both sides that don't make sense. When you make the argument that the CCP as is, or even stronger, is the only way you can have fairness for all consumers, then you leave out that category of sellers that you just described. And then when you say you do away with it entirely, you're forgetting that you're only talking about a small segment of sellers. I mean, we can go down the weeds on this too, but I think ultimately
I can argue both sides. I ran a huge pre-MLS campaign in Austin for our brokerage. I ran pre-MLS Austin when it was Twitter. And I would promote pre-MLS listings of ours and other brokers. So I get it. I used it for marketing. But was I doing that truly for the benefit of the seller? I was really doing it for us.
The clear cooperation policy has a huge benefit for agents. And I think that's, you can't just virtue signal that this is only a benefit for all buyers. It benefits agents. And there is to your point, there is probably an adjustment that can be made to protect some of those brokers and sellers who just see it differently. It's going to be a very small population.
It will.
But by the way, so Tom, any final thoughts here? Well, this has been a great conversation. I feel like.
What I love is a lot of the things I wanted to talk about, Jack was right ahead of, which, I think that's it. I take it personally, the way people casually view real estate. I mean, Byron knows this about me, and everything you're talking about here, raising the level of professionalism, like that's who's going to win. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And all a lot of the things you hit on this report are great. I think that the advice I have for the listeners is that you got to read the report and actually implement on the stuff there. That's don't just read this and be like, hey, I knew about this. Well, there's things you can change now that will change your business for the next couple of decades if you interpret this properly. And that's really what Jack and T360 are here to do. So kudos to you guys. I mean, I think it's a great report, and the people that are serious about helping consumers and having a great business are going to take it to heart and actually use it.
Make 2025 a banner year for making a big change in your business. I tell people every year you should make some big change in your business that levels you up. And this year for 2025, I'd do a couple big moves because we're in that time, adopt some new tools that have a lot of AI in them to make your business easier to run. Figure out how to do all the buyer stuff at a higher level, more professional. Like there's something you can pick on where you will become a better professional or your company will become better. Don't miss the moment. Don't miss it, because this is it's a special moment we're in right now, and it may feel rough, it may be tough, it may be hard because you don't have enough transactions coming in. Now's the time to double down. Now's the time to make those investments. As painful as it is, now's the time to do it, because other people won't, and you'll get the advantage if you do.
And Jack, you kind of reinforced it. Something I've been thinking about here, and Deborah from Gary Ashton, CEO, said to me the other day, and some other people have said to me, maybe one of the big shifts a lot of us need to make is being involved at those local association levels in NAR, because if that is going to be the system that you have, if it's not going away, then you can't. It's like one of those things where it's like, on Wednesday, if you complain about whoever gets in, but you didn't vote on Tuesday, you don't really have, a leg to stand on there. So that's something I'm thinking a lot about and really being serious about it, and why I'm going to next week to see what's going on out there. But anyways, we got to wrap here. We're going to put the link for the opportunity report. We'll also link up the danger report. It is 10 years old, but if you want to start from the beginning of where the opportunity report was born, we're going to link both of those. We'll also link, because we mentioned it a couple times throughout the pod, the trends report, which is something that you would have to purchase down below. I don't know. I think I've purchased I have stacks of them, maybe 9 or 10 or 11
it's on Byron's coffee table
editions. No, I have them all actually here in the office, but we'll link all of that stuff below. We'll link the Real Estate News article that gave some highlights to the nowbam.com article that gave some highlights of the opportunity report. So you'll have all those sources down in the show notes. Jack, couldn't thank you enough for taking the time to do this, the report, and as well as getting on pods like this to share the information, the insights.
Really delighted. Thanks for having me. And to everybody watching, I appreciate you and everything you make this a better industry. Keep doing it.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
We know that in 2024, your business operations will be more important than ever. Once I figured this out, my business was able to scale and take off. See, generating leads is one thing, but getting that deal across the finish line while keeping everyone happy is another story. Enter Mosaic, everything you need once a lead becomes a client. Mosaic picks up where CRMs leave off to streamline the client experience and maximize your productivity. It's the operating platform that gives agents and teams everything they need to stay organized and proactive throughout the entire transaction process and beyond. Transaction management, forms, AI-powered collaborative search, client retention capabilities, and advanced analytics for your business. In other words, you can use Mosaic to create a powerful flywheel for your business. It will help you close every deal, boost your profitability, and generate more repeat and referral business. If you need a better way to run your business, check out the link below and learn how Mosaic can help you today. At BAMX, we listen to what real estate professionals want and need. That's why our platform is filled with sought-after courses, content, and tactical assets for your business. And that's why we launched BAMX in a box with templates and scripts done for you, delivered each Friday. The best part? It's not coming from panel pontificators who bought their followers and don't sell any real estate. It's coming from top agents, team leaders, and content creators in the industry. It's education that actually shows you how to do what you need in today's market. And now it includes editable templates and scripts so you can easily deliver that knowledge to your database. Every day, we continue to add more content into BAMX, into our private Facebook community, content that works, content that our members have exclusive access to daily. Do not wait any longer. Use code KNOWLEDGEBROKERS and join the thousands of agents taking their business to the next level today. Use Knowledge Brokers for 10% off. See you in BAMX.